So I actually really enjoy The Boys season 4, and a lot of it does pertain to Homelander. I think Anthony Starr's performance is awesome. The way that Homelander's written is awesome. Just when you think that the character can't get any more interesting, I think they've taken something that is a delicious treat and already added a better topping to it. But I'm going to get back to that later and talk about first how there's a lot of different online reviewers. Some are pretty down the center. Others usually kind of pander to a lot of these. And then you have those who just live to point out woke stuff or anything like that, like any sort of gender swapping. And then what they'll do is they'll hyper focus on that and then use it to destroy the rest of the series or use it to make it out to be like the worst thing that's ever happened. And now look, I'm not totally against people who point out ridiculous things, especially when someone sacrifices the script just so they could shoehorn politics in there. But other than that, I'm not opposed to having a political message in there. In fact, honestly, sometimes it's good to hear from most ideologies. The only reason I say most is because there are some that are outright evil, and sometimes you got to say, okay, you got to know when's when. Just kind of like when Matrix 4 came out. Look, I understand that that's an imperfect movie. I actually found parts of it that I enjoyed. There are a few diamonds in the rough of that script. Now, obviously, that movie had no right being made. I thought that they capped off the third movie perfectly, but with Keanu Reeves' popularity, they brought Neo back and gave him and Trinity another adventure, down the line. And it was actually all right because at least I did get to see what happened post-Machine War, everything like that. It just kind of seemed like it had its place at the end of the day, and maybe that's just because I like to look at the brighter side of things. I don't really go out of my way to just go out and hate on a piece of art unless I actually see a very big reason to disapprove of it. As someone who identifies as a Christian, I actually really do enjoy Last Temptation of Christ, as offensive to a lot of Christians as that can be, because I think it's a good thought-provoking piece. Put a human in the divine shoes, and they even give you this disclaimer. It's not based off of actual scripture. But a lot of people like to get religious even when there's no religion in there, just like with a lot of these political messages, where if one thing doesn't pertain to what people want to hear, then they throw the whole thing out and deem it evil. Because when I was watching Matrix 4, let me tell you something. Well, I was pointing out a couple things that I liked, and I obviously had things in the script that I just felt didn't shine with me, or there were parts of the movie that I just felt were kind of cringy. The funny thing that stood out to me is one of my buddies at the time, who I really just don't hang out with as much because he's absolutely let the political sphere consume his life, and he's just quick to point out things that are happening on Twitter to the point where it's like, okay, dude, I want to talk about some things other than politics or anything like that. And out of all the things, the one thing that offended him was Trinity flying at the end. And I had issue with that mainly because it was about the one and how there's only one person with the one source code. It's actually written in the script that one person has the code. But the fact that now there's two people flying around, for me, it kind of just rubbed me the wrong way. But the one reason that this guy had a problem with it was because it pushes quote-unquote woke politics. And I think that's a similar thing with these reviews is, look, I know that now the political sphere of The Boys has kind of started leaning a little bit more to the left aisle, but there was also a time where it also leaned to the right. So I think it's taken jabs at both sides. And you know what? I think that there's truths in a lot of these things because I don't look at it from a sides of the politics spectrum. I just kind of look at it as a life lessons because although throughout the human nature of politics, I'm going to be honest, we could learn a lot of lessons, but taking the politics out of it, when you get down to the human elements of Homelander and Anthony Starr and how these characters are carrying everything, I have to say Homelander is the one guy I always look forward to watching, especially they have taken his story and made it even better and more deeper and added more layers to this character to the point where now it actually is its own work of art in a lot of senses. Do I understand that this is not the same as the comic book? Yes, and to be honest, sometimes I think that's a good thing because I've looked at the actual comics of The Boys and it doesn't get as deep as the show does. I'm going to be real. I think it's just edgy for edginess' sake at sometimes, but there's aspects of the show that are so different that I actually think it's good that we separated it, because the comic books, sometimes it's good to get a little shock value-ish. I'm a fan of that, but when it's nonstop shock value and just nonstop like ridiculousness of shock value, sometimes I just get a little bored with it. Like I grow a little callousness to the shock that they put out there. But this show has seasoned us with the shock, and while we're kind of used to the environment and the violent nature of the show, even though I have to say season 4, episode 4 kind of took a lot of the violence to a very psychologically torturous and a little more sadistic level, I think that the writing actually complemented that point to the point where we actually saw Homelander take revenge on the people who had wronged him in his past. And now with season 5, we're starting to see that it wasn't enough for Homelander, and he's going to lean into the parts that don't make him human. I think that the aspect of humanity itself being present in the script from this angle is an amazing touch, because it's something, like I said, human nature of politics, human nature outside of politics. I just like when there's a human element to these stories that really pushes it forward. And maybe that's my biasness, because, look, with all the politics that are being pushed in modern media, I think sometimes we get a little bit consumed to that, where we actually forget, okay, but what non-political message to our human lives can we apply this to? Like, what part of our humanity as people does this try to assimilate and show us? Like with Homelander, I'm understanding that, yeah, one of the things that makes us human is our need for love and approval by our tribe and our society and our community. And I firmly believe that Homelander is relatable to a majority of people, because there's times where everybody has looked at themselves in the mirror and thought that they were separate from humanity or different from them in one aspect or another. And I think that in a time where a lot of people kind of feel like they're the only ones, especially with the rise of social media and how we're all kind of in our own little narcissistic bubble, it's easy to feed into what I call the Homelander syndrome coming into a lot of different people in modern society nowadays, like the hyper individuality, where we actually do view ourselves as separate from society. And it is in somewhat a lot relatable. Now, are we always going to handle it the way Homelander's been handling it? You know what? I hope not. That would be a bad day for a lot of people. But it's aspects like this that we could bond over and say, hey, maybe I'm not the only one, that I really like when people connect to this aspect. But it kind of gets a little shameful when people like look at the politics of it and just want to damn the show from the very beginning and not give it a chance because it doesn't align with their political message. But I'm going to be real. I can't wait to see the rest of this season. I think that it's deep. I think it actually might be the end. And yeah, I'm hoping that it ends completely different from the comics. And I could already tell, because there's certain plot points from the comics that are no longer really in the series. But I think that's the writer's ways of saying, you know what? That's what we're doing. We are making this its own separate piece of art. And I think that's good, because I'm going to end with another thing, like another kind of mini side tangent about the original sources and then what we get. Because nowadays we see book turned into movie. I'm a big fan of book series like The Maze Runner, and then I watch the movies and see how different they were. And then you could watch any sort of Stephen King movie and then read the book and understand just how different it is, because you can't get Stephen King's sick and twisted mind put onto a screen, because one, the screen's not always going to allow it. And two, I think it's good that sometimes the original material is left its own thing, and you can't just copy what's already perfect. Sometimes a tribute act, like with what we're seeing, might just be good enough, and we can't always strive for that perfection. But I think The Boys Season 4 is definitely what I would call perfectly imperfect. I know that there's a lot of different opinions coming through it, and they have every right to make that. Sometimes I watch those content pieces just because, hey, I like to see what it is that other people are thinking about this show, and a lot of that differing opinions is actually quite fun. But other than that, I digress. I'm looking forward to the rest of this. Peace out. Have a great one.